They told her it would be 12 hours. Just 12. Stay behind. Stabilize the wounded. Help would come. But it didn't. The others flew out before sunrise. The radio died before noon. Now it was just her. And a boy bleeding out in her lap, whispering for a mother she couldn't be. The dog sat beside her. Quiet. Loyal. Hurt. Still watching. Still waiting. Still hoping for a sound that wouldn't come. Let me take you back to where it all began. My amazing friends and family, welcome back to Jenna's Velvet Tales. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe. Every subscription helps us share more emotional stories about the deep bonds between humans and animals. If this kind of story touches you, your support truly means a lot. Feel free to say where you're watching from, and don't forget to explore more beautiful stories here on the channel. Now back to the story. Her name was Marin. She wasn't special, not in the way people think of heroes. She never liked attention. She didn't smile for the cameras when the training ended or when they pinned the medic patch to her chest. She just nodded, tucked the badge into her vest, and focused on the next task. That's who she was. Quiet, focused, precise. And when her unit was ordered into the valley that week, she packed extra bandages without being told. Axel had been assigned to her 6 months earlier. He was calm, observant. He didn't bark or pull like the younger dogs. He stayed close and kept his eyes on her, even when she wasn't looking. People said he was too serious for a dog. She liked that about him. He never asked questions. He just stayed. The mission changed fast. Fires broke out in the village down the hill. They were told to hold position, dig in, protect the injured. Then a new order came. Pull everyone out except her. She had the trauma training. The others didn't. Someone had to stay with the wounded until the next drop. So she stayed. No hesitation. She always followed through. That morning, she carried a young man, barely 18, across the ridge. He was shaking so hard she thought he'd fall apart in her arms. Blood had soaked through his side, and his words came in short, scared bursts. She pressed her hand against the wound, told him to breathe, promised help was coming. But help didn't come. She tried the radio again and again. Each time the same voice, faint and cracked. Hold position. Repeat. Hold. Then nothing. By sunset, she knew the truth. The others had left her, and no one was coming back. She didn't cry. Not right away. She looked down at the boy whose name she didn't know and adjusted the makeshift bandage on his stomach. She whispered that he was going to be okay, even if she didn't believe it. Axel was at her side the whole time, eyes fixed on the horizon. His leg had been wrapped with gauze from earlier that day. A piece of shrapnel had nicked him. She cleaned it, stitched it, wrapped it tight. He never limped. He never whimpered. He just stayed close. When the boy stopped breathing, she stayed beside him for a while. She didn't move, didn't speak. She reached out and closed his eyes, then looked at the last of the morphine. 2 syringes left. She looked at Axel and said, "We're gonna need both." That night the wind picked up. Smoke from the village fires moved over the camp like a slow curtain. The tents had burned. The last tarp had blown loose. She dug a shallow ditch and moved the remaining wounded closer together. There were 3 still breathing. One had a broken leg. One was unconscious. The third was awake, just barely. A woman, older, holding onto a faded photo of someone Marin didn't recognize. The woman wouldn't speak. She just stared at the flames in the distance, her lips moving like she was praying, but no sound came out. Marin used the last of the clean gauze. She didn't let herself think too far ahead. Thinking too far ahead meant facing what she already suspected, that they had been left on purpose. She checked the batteries on the radio. Low. One channel left open, but the signal was weak. She tried the emergency line. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Axel's ears perked once, but he didn't move. She whispered, "It's okay. We'll try again later." But she didn't believe that either. At midnight, she gave up on sleep. She leaned against a broken crate and ran her hand through Axel's fur. It was stiff with ash. His tail thumped once. She smiled, barely. "I wish I could ask what you think," she said. But you'd probably just tell me to keep going. She paused, then added, You always do. Axel nudged her hand. That small movement, that quiet gesture, it was all she needed to not fall apart. She didn't remember drifting off. But sometime after, something changed. A sound not from the sky, not from the hill, from the ground. She opened her eyes. Axel was up, standing, staring toward the back of the old supply tent. His head tilted. What is it? He didn't move. She stood, knees stiff, body aching, and followed his gaze. Axel stepped forward, slowly, then stopped. He sniffed the dirt, moved left, sniffed again, then began digging. It was careful at first, focused, like he knew something was there. She grabbed the old folding shovel and knelt beside him. What are you looking for? He didn't answer. He just kept digging. The ground was harder than she expected. Packed, dry. But something about it felt off. Too smooth, too even. She dug for 10 minutes before the edge of something metal showed beneath the soil. It was a door. She froze. Axel. He sat back, waiting. Maren wiped the dirt from the edge. Her fingers trembled. It wasn't fear. It was something else. That strange feeling in your chest when something big is about to happen, but you don't know if it's good or bad. The hatch had no handle, just a flat metal plate. She used a rock to pry at the edge. After a minute, it gave way. A cold rush of air met her face. She leaned down, listened. Nothing. She looked at Axel. You first. He didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, paused, then began to descend. She followed. What they found changed everything. She kept her hand on the wall as they moved. It was cold, damp, and rough, like old concrete left to rot. The hallway was narrow. Her shoulders brushed both sides. Axel moved ahead of her, careful and quiet. The air smelled like rust and wet clothes. She stepped around broken crates, crushed cans, a child's shoe with no match. Her boots were soaked through by the time they reached the first room. It was darker here. She clicked the tiny flashlight clipped to her vest and aimed it low. There were people on the floor. At first, she couldn't tell if they were alive. Axel stepped closer. His nose moved gently near a man's shoulder. Then he sat. That meant breathing. She moved in. There were more than a dozen. Some were sitting up against the wall. Most were lying down. A girl held a baby close to her chest. An old man had one arm around a boy who looked no older than 8. Some were awake. Most were not. She whispered, I'm not here to hurt you. The girl looked up. Her lips were dry. Her face was pale. But her eyes were clear. You're American, the girl said, soft, slow. Maren nodded. I'm a medic, she said. I don't have much, but I'll do what I can. The girl nodded once, then closed her eyes again, still rocking the baby in her arms. Maren lowered her pack. She counted what she had left. 3 bandages, 2 wraps, a quarter bottle of antiseptic, 1 packet of electrolytes, and 2 more bars of food. That was it. She heard a sound behind her and turned fast. Axel hadn't moved. He was still sitting beside the man he'd found. Watching. Listening. Always watching. Maren stood up, moved to the far end of the room. That's when she saw it. The box in the corner. She froze. It had a red cross on it. She moved closer. The corner was marked with a number she knew. It was one of hers. One of the supply crates that never arrived. The one command told her had been destroyed in a fire 2 weeks ago. But it was here. And it wasn't the only one. Behind the crate were more boxes. Stacked, torn, half open. All marked. All American. She dropped to her knees and opened the first one. Bandages. Gauze. Pain meds. For bags. Ration packs. Everything she'd been told was lost. They weren't lost. They were hidden. She leaned back, heart racing. Her hands shook. Not from fear. From rage. She remembered the message. The final order. Hold position. Like she was a placeholder. A delay. A piece of furniture in a burning room. They never planned to come back for her. And they never planned to come back for these people either. Axel came up beside her. He didn't make a sound. He didn't have to. She looked at him. They lied to us. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. She stood up and turned toward the room. No one here was an enemy. Not anymore. There were no guns. No armor. Just people too weak to run and too scared to hope. She walked back toward the girl with the baby. Sat down beside her. "What happened?" she asked gently. The girl looked at her. "They told us to come here. Said someone would help." Marin nodded slowly. "Do you know who told them that?" she asked. The girl shook her head. "Men in uniform, but not yours. Not theirs either. Private." "I think so." Marin didn't ask more. She didn't need to. She'd seen enough. She gave the girl her last water packet and opened one of the recovered crates. It would be enough for now. She moved between bodies, checking pulses, adjusting limbs, wrapping wounds. Axel followed behind her, sometimes nudging her toward someone she hadn't seen. When she paused to rest, she leaned against the crate. Her fingers found her vest cam. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want medals. She wanted someone, anyone, to see what had been done here, to know they weren't just names on a list. She turned on the camera. It blinked once. She kept her voice low, measured. "If you're hearing this, it means I found what you told me didn't exist. You said the supplies were destroyed. You said the evac was coming. You said we weren't alone." She turned the camera toward the girl and the baby, then toward the man Axel had found. She showed their faces, not to shame them, to prove they mattered. "You chose not to see this," she said. "But I'm showing you now, because someone has to." She turned the camera back on herself. "I'm staying, not because I was ordered to, because they deserve someone who won't leave." She clicked it off, connected it to the transmitter. Axel lay beside her, head on his paws. She touched his ear gently. "You're gonna hate me for this," she said. "But we're not leaving." He didn't move. She looked down at her hands. They were dirty, tired, still trembling. But she had work to do, and she wasn't finished yet. She didn't sleep that night, not even a little. There wasn't time, and even if there had been, her mind wouldn't have let her. The bunker was cold and silent except for a few soft breaths, a quiet cough, and Axel's steady breathing next to her. Every few minutes, she checked the baby's chest to make sure it was still rising. Every time it was, barely. By morning, 3 more people had died. An older man with blood dried into his shirt. A boy who never opened his eyes. And a woman Marin had bandaged the day before, whose hands had stayed clasped even after her heart stopped. She folded their arms gently, covered their faces with cloth, and didn't say a word. Axel watched her from the shadows. She tried the radio again. Nothing. She pulled the signal cable tighter, rewired the broken part using a loose piece of her flashlight, and tried again. Still nothing. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. It was quiet, hoarse. "You shouldn't be here." Marin turned. It was a man, lean, pale, mid-40s maybe. His left shoulder was wrapped in someone else's shirt. His right hand was pressed against his ribs like something hurt deep. He was watching her. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. She nodded once. "I know. You're American," he said. "I am. Medic." She nodded again. He sat up straighter and winced. Axel stood and moved forward slowly, stopping near the man's feet. The man looked down at the dog, then back at her. "He yours?" Marin looked at Axel. "He's his own. But yeah, he came with me." There was silence for a moment. Then the man said, "You won't make it out." "I know. You're staying anyway?" She nodded. He studied her face, then said, "They'll forget you." "I know that too." He didn't ask why she was helping. He just looked around the room and said, "There's another section, behind the old boiler room. You have to crawl. But there's more people there. Kids. Some hurt bad." Marin didn't move right away. Then she stood. "Can you walk?" He nodded slowly. "Then show me." She followed him past the rusted boiler, through a crack in the wall barely wider than her shoulders. The space on the other side was damp and darker than the rest, but it wasn't empty. There were more. For children. 2 injured adults. 1 man unconscious. Maren knelt beside the smallest child. A girl, maybe 4 years old, with a fever so hot she couldn't open her eyes. Her skin was flushed, her breathing shallow. The woman beside her whispered, "She's my niece. Please." Maren reached for her pack. "I'll try." It took an hour to stabilize the child. She used the last of the fever meds, cooled her with wet cloth from the emergency pack, and mixed half a ration into water to help hydrate her. Axel lay beside the girl while she worked, head low to the ground. When it was over, the woman grabbed Maren's hand. "Why are you here?" she asked. Maren didn't know how to answer, so she didn't. She just looked around the room, then said, "We need to move them closer. We'll make one space for everyone." She started clearing a path. The man who'd spoken earlier helped. So did 2 others who were strong enough to stand. Together, they carried the injured back to the main room. Took most of the day. Maren stopped only to give Axel water and to change the bandage on his paw. He licked her wrist once and leaned into her leg. By nightfall, she had set up a central station using the crates. 4 bags tied with string to pipes, cloth beds laid out in a ring. It looked nothing like a hospital, but it was cleaner, safer. One of the children, an older boy, offered her his jacket. She thanked him but gave it to someone colder. That night, someone sang a lullaby in a language she didn't understand. And Maren cried, quietly, where no one could see. In the morning, she knew she had to send the message again. She cleaned her face, tied her hair back, and set the camera on a crate. She looked into the lens, paused, then began. "My name is Maren Cole. I was assigned to stay behind on Ridge 27. I followed orders. I waited for evac. It never came. I found a hidden bunker. It's filled with people. Civilians, children, wounded. Many not from our side. They have no food, no clean water. Some are dying." She picked up the camera and walked. She showed their faces. She didn't speak over them. She let the silence say what words couldn't. Then she turned the camera back to herself. "I know what this looks like. Maybe someone will say I broke protocol. Maybe they'll say this was never our fight. But if you see this, if you're watching, remember this. We were left behind. All of us. And we didn't give up. We stayed. Because someone had to." She ended the recording. Axel was beside her, chest rising slow and steady. She pressed the send button, then waited. But no one answered. Not that day. Not the next. Still she stayed. She rationed. She stitched. She shared her jacket with the girl and her baby. She gave her last protein bar to the old man with the missing foot. And when one more child collapsed from weakness, she carried him herself, barefoot, across the rocky corridor to the last clean place in the shelter. Axel followed her the whole way, until he didn't. She turned. He was behind her, still standing but limping worse than before. She ran back, dropped to her knees. His bandage was soaked through. She touched his fur gently. "Not now," she whispered. "Not you too." He licked her wrist again, the same way he always did. Even then, even while bleeding, she pulled him close and held him until the shaking stopped. She didn't know if the message had gone through, but she knew this. They were still here, still breathing, still human, and someone had to remember that. She woke up to coughing. Not just one, but several, deep, dry, painful. The kind that stays in the chest too long. She sat up fast. Her back ached from sleeping on concrete, but that didn't matter. She scanned the room. 2 of the children had gotten worse overnight. The baby's breathing was shallow now. The fever had returned. And the old man, he hadn't moved. She crawled over, her knees scraping against the cracked floor, and checked his pulse. There wasn't one. She placed her hand on his chest and closed her eyes just for a second. Then she pulled the cloth over his face. Axel stirred beside her. His breathing was slower now. His eyes opened and followed her, but he didn't stand. His leg was worse. The bandage had to come off. She unwrapped it carefully. The wound was infected. Red, swollen, warm to the touch. He let out a small breath, not a whimper, but enough that she knew it hurt. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, "You stayed for me. Now I stay for you." She cleaned the wound with the last of the antiseptic and rewrapped it tightly. She had nothing left, not even a single clean cloth. Nothing to feed them, nothing to give them water. She looked around the room. Faces were fading. Hope was low. It was silent except for breathing and the occasional cough. She walked back to the signal unit. The red light was still blinking. The message had been sent, but there was still no reply. She sat down, her head in her hands, her throat tight, and for the first time since the beginning, she whispered something she hadn't dared to say out loud. What if they never planned to answer? And then came a sound. Not the radio. A voice. Weak but real. "I think they didn't." She turned around. It was the same man from earlier, the one with the shoulder wound. He was leaning against the wall, watching her. "They left you," he said. "And us." She didn't argue. "I was one of them once," he said slowly. "Different badge, different language, but same orders." She met his eyes. "I stopped following them when I realized they stopped caring who lived." Marin stood and walked toward him. "You knew about this place?" she asked. He nodded. "I helped carry people down here before I was shot." "Why didn't they send anyone?" He looked away. "Because we weren't worth the trouble." She sat down next to him. "They think I'm gone," she said. He looked back at her. "You're not." Neither of them spoke for a while. Then she stood. "I need water, food, something. If we don't get it, they'll all die." He pointed to a metal hatch in the corner. "There's a tunnel that leads out, but it's narrow and not safe." "Where does it go?" "About half a mile to the south. An old outpost, long abandoned." Marin looked at Axel. Then she looked at the girl holding her baby, too weak to speak now. "I'll go," she said. "You can't leave them alone," the man said. She hesitated, then said, "You'll stay with them?" He nodded. She packed what little gear she had left. She kissed Axel on the top of his head. "I'll be back," she whispered, and he let her go. The tunnel was worse than she expected. Tight, wet, airless. She crawled most of the way, dragging her pack behind her. Her elbows scraped the ground. Her knees burned. She wanted to stop, but she didn't. When she finally reached the end, she pushed up on the hatch and found herself in the back room of what used to be a supply shed. It had long been abandoned. Empty shelves, a rusted metal table, and in the corner 2 unopened crates with US markings. She almost laughed. She opened the first crate. Water packets, protein bars, wipes, medical tape. She opened the second. Blankets, for kits, gloves. It was enough to help. Not everything, but enough. She packed everything she could into her pack and grabbed an empty sack hanging on a hook to carry more. Took her nearly an hour to drag it all back through the tunnel. When she emerged, Axel was waiting near the entrance. He stood slowly, limped toward her. She dropped everything and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I told you I'd come back." She sat up quickly, distributed water, shared food, cleaned the worst wounds. For the first time in days, the air didn't feel like it was closing in. That night, the girl with the baby spoke again. "Is it true? They left you?" Marin looked at her. "They left us." The girl looked down at her baby, who was finally sleeping peacefully. "But you came back." Marin nodded. "I always come back." She sat down beside Axel. His head rested on her lap. She looked at the radio again. Still blinking. Still quiet. She didn't care anymore. She reached into her vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was something she wrote on the day she was assigned to the hill. A simple note. A reminder. No one gets left behind. She placed it beside Axel, then looked at the children, the wounded, the forgotten. They were all still here. So was she. Because staying wasn't weakness. It was a promise. She was exhausted. Her fingers were scraped. Her back ached. Her lips were cracked. But still, she didn't stop. She moved from one person to the next, checking pulses, offering sips of water, tying slings out of shirt sleeves, wrapping tiny feet in the blankets she dragged through that tunnel. Some of them smiled at her now. Not all. Not even most. But a few. And that was enough to keep her going. She tried not to look at the ones they'd lost. Not yet. She couldn't afford to break. Not here. Not when the others still needed her to stand. The baby's fever finally broke. The girl who held her leaned her head against Marin's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you," like it was the only word she had left in her mouth. Marin didn't answer. She just wrapped her arm around the girl's back and closed her eyes for a few seconds. That night, she boiled what little water they had using a rusted can and a candle stub. She made tea with crushed herbs someone had found in a tin beneath a broken pipe. It didn't taste good, but it was warm. She shared it with the man who had warned her, the one with the shoulder wound. He took a sip, then looked at her in the dim light. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him. "Marin. Why didn't you run when you found the tunnel?" She stirred the tea. "Because they can't run. And I couldn't leave them again." He nodded slowly. "You know the message probably didn't reach them," he said. "I know. And even if it did, I know." He didn't say anything else. She didn't either. The silence said enough. Later that night, Axel whined for the first time. It wasn't loud. Barely a sound at all. But it stopped her cold. She crawled over and knelt beside him. He was curled against the wall, eyes open, head down. His breathing was uneven. She touched his side gently. He flinched. She unwrapped his bandage. The wound was worse. The infection had spread. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She opened the med kit. She had antibiotics, but not the strong kind. No proper needle. No sedative. Nothing to stop the pain. Nothing to buy him more time. She pressed her forehead to his. "You saved all of them," she whispered. Axel blinked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the last pain syringe. She looked at it, then at him. He didn't move. Her hands shook. "I can't lose you," she said. "Not you." She gave him the shot, just to help him rest, just to stop the shaking. She curled up beside him and stayed there all night, whispering stories into his ear, about when they first met, about how he stole her sandwich during training, about the time he got her out of a flash flood by dragging her up a muddy bank with his teeth in her belt loop. He didn't respond, but she kept talking, just in case. At sunrise, someone shook her awake. It was the boy, the one who had offered her his jacket. "There's something on the radio," he said. She sat up fast, ran to the transmitter. The red light was still blinking, but there was something new now. A voice, faint, but clear. "This is Sierra Command. We've received your transmission. Confirm location. Repeat, confirm location." Marin didn't breathe. She grabbed the mic. "This is Marin Cole. Ridge 27. Emergency shelter beneath supply zone." There was silence. Then static. Then the voice returned. "Hold position. Stand by." She dropped the mic and cried. Not from fear. Not from pain. From something else. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in days. Relief. She turned to the others. "They heard us." The girl with the baby clutched her mouth. The man with the shoulder wound sat down hard. Someone whispered, "Thank God." But Marin knew better than to celebrate too soon. She waited all day. Night came. No sign of help. Only static. Only silence. She sat beside Axel again. His breathing was worse. She pressed her ear to his chest. Still there. Faint, but there. She kissed his head and said, "They'll come. I know they will." Morning came. Then another. Still nothing. Then finally, just after dusk, there was movement outside. Footsteps. Voices. Axel lifted his head. Marin grabbed her vest, stood, and stepped toward the hatch. The voice came again. Clearer this time. "This is Sierra Unit 6. We have visual on the hatch. Moving to extraction." She dropped to her knees. "They're here," she whispered. The girl clutched her baby tighter. The boy hugged his little sister. And for the first time, the people in that shelter looked like survivors. Not ghosts. Not forgotten. Survivors. The hatch opened. A man in gear stepped inside. He looked at Marin. then at the people behind her. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stood, tired, dirty, hollow-eyed, and she said, her final order meant dying in the enemy camp. She took one slow step forward. But what the combat medic and her K9 did next? She looked down at Axel, still breathing beside her. Left headquarters silent. The moment the hatch opened, light poured in. Real light. Not the flicker of candles or the glow of broken lamps, but clean, sharp daylight. For a few seconds, no one moved. The man standing there, the soldier in full gear, helmet on, radio clipped to his chest, looked frozen. Not from fear, from disbelief. He scanned the shelter. He saw the stretchers made from crates and blankets. He saw the sick, the old, the children, and he saw her, standing there, worn out and steady, with her hand resting on the head of a dog that looked more like a shadow than a soldier's partner. The silence was louder than anything Marin had heard in days. Then the soldier raised his voice and said, Sierra Unit 6, this is Delta Ground. We've made contact. We need medevac. Immediate. A second voice came through his earpiece. Copy. Confirm. Survivors. He looked back at Marin. His voice cracked. Too many to count. Marin didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, then knelt beside Axel. His breathing was shallow. His fur was damp. His eyes half closed. She ran her fingers through the side of his neck. They're here, she whispered. I kept my promise. His tail thumped once. Just once. That was enough. The room behind her was still quiet. Most of the survivors hadn't processed what was happening. A few had stood up, barely. One woman clutched her rosary. A boy held onto Marin's pant leg like it was the only solid thing left in the world. More soldiers came through the hatch. One of them carried a med kit, and when he saw Axel, he rushed forward. We've got a K9 down. Severe infection, frontal leg, high fever. Marin looked up. No morphine left. I gave him one last dose yesterday. The soldier nodded. We'll take it from here. She didn't let go of Axel's side. Not yet. A medic looked at her. You need medical attention too. I'm fine. You're not fine. I'm still standing. The medic didn't argue after that. One by one, the wounded were lifted from the shelter, carried gently, given water, blankets, words of comfort from strangers in uniforms they hadn't seen in days. Marin walked out last. She shielded her eyes as she stepped into the sun. Felt wrong at first. Too bright, too open, like she didn't belong there anymore. She turned around just once and looked back at the hatch. Still open, still waiting, but empty now. She didn't know why she felt the need to say it, but she did. I'll come back for the others, she said. A nearby soldier asked, Others? She nodded. The ones that didn't make it. The man looked confused. They're gone. She looked him in the eyes. That doesn't mean we forget. He didn't reply. They put Axel on a stretcher and loaded him into the chopper first. He didn't lift his head, but his chest still moved. That's what mattered. As the blades spun up and the ground shook beneath them, Marin sat with her back against the wall of the aircraft, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes locked on Axel's still form across from her. No one spoke to her during the flight. She didn't want them to. She just kept one hand over her heart, where the tiny recorder rested in her pocket. The message, the proof, everything she had seen, everything they had buried, everything they tried to erase, still there, still alive, still here. The helicopter landed without ceremony. No fanfare, no rush of waiting hands or warm greetings. Just a hard jolt, a whistle from the crew chief, and then movement. Stretchers being lifted, medics shouting instructions, boots hitting gravel. Marin didn't move at first. She just watched as they wheeled Axel toward the emergency unit. His head was still down. One paw twitched. That was the only sign he was still fighting. She followed, slow at first, legs stiff, body cold despite the heat of the landing zone. Dirt stuck to the sweat on her skin. Her uniform was stiff with dried blood. Some of it hers, most of it not. They tried to stop her at the gate. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." She didn't say a word. She walked right past. No one stopped her after that. Axel was on a table now. A vet was speaking fast. Temperature critical, leg abscessed, high chance of systemic spread. She stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed. "If you have to take the leg," she said, her voice rough, "you take it, but you don't let him go." The vet paused, looked up. "We'll do everything we can." "Good," she said, and turned away before they could ask her name. She didn't go to the recovery tent. She didn't report to debrief. She walked straight toward the satellite unit at the edge of the base, the one with the encrypted comms line and the high antennas pointing toward headquarters. Inside, 2 officers looked up from a desk. One of them stood. "Ma'am." She pulled the recorder from her vest and placed it on the table. "Run it. All of it. Don't edit. Don't trim. Don't even blink." The officer looked confused. "What is this?" She didn't raise her voice. "Everything they didn't want you to see." She turned and walked out. 10 minutes later, the room behind her was dead silent. On the screen, a girl holding a baby with no blanket. A boy lying on a concrete floor, coughing blood. The bodies of 3 civilians, neatly covered in cloth. The hands of a medic tying a bandage with shaking fingers. And her voice, calm, honest, heavy with things no one wanted to say. If you're watching this, it's already too late to pretend you didn't know. 2 hours later, the top brass was notified. A meeting was called. Closed door. Classified. No cameras. No names on the minutes. They watched it all. Every second. No one interrupted. When it ended, one of the generals stood and said only 4 words. "Shut it all down." That night, Marin sat alone outside the animal unit. Her knees pulled up to her chest, her back against the building. The stars above her looked fake. Too perfect, too far. Her eyes were red, but she hadn't cried. She didn't know how anymore. A soft shuffle behind her made her turn. A nurse stood in the doorway. "He's awake," the woman said. Marin didn't breathe for a second. Then she stood. Fast. She walked inside quietly, like she was afraid noise would break him. Axel lay on a small bed, and 4 running into his side. His eyes were open now. Tired. Slower. But awake. When she stepped close, he lifted his head slightly. "Hey!" she whispered. "You scared me." His tail moved once. Then again. She sat on the floor beside him and leaned her head against the edge of his bed. "They're trying to bury it all," she said. "Erase it. Pretend it didn't happen." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the dog tag with the scratched word she'd written that morning before boarding the chopper. She held it up. "Still here," she whispered. His eyes followed the tag. Then he let out a small, tired breath. She smiled. The next day, an unmarked package appeared at the border between 3 divided zones. No return address. No signature. Inside were bandages, water tablets, ration packs, and a photo. The shelter. Still standing. Still full. Still waiting. Under the photo, 1 word had been scribbled. More. 3 days later, another package arrived at a different outpost. Same contents. Different route. This time, a second tag came with it. Still here. It was the same handwriting. They never gave Marin a medal. They never mentioned her name in the reports. Her file was sealed. Her rank was quietly removed from the logs. She didn't return home. She didn't want to. Weeks later, in a town no one wrote about, a quiet woman with short hair and tired eyes opened a small door behind a clinic that didn't officially exist. Children lined up outside holding slips of paper with names. No uniforms. No questions. No flags. Inside, a dog with a scar on his leg lay in the corner, watching every move she made. When the last child left that night, she sat beside him on the floor and whispered, "We saved them. That's what matters." Axel rolled onto his side, one paw reaching toward her lap. She took it, held it tight, didn't let go. "Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.